It's always a good day when I open up Goodreads to look at the reviews of a book that I just read, and amongst the top reviews is someone listing a pros and cons list about the book, and on the cons list is lesbians. So a while back, I acquired a copy of Four Eids and a Funeral. This was written by two authors. That is Farida Abike-Imide, the person that wrote Where Sleeping Girls Lie and Ace of Spades, both of which I absolutely loved. And this other author who I read a short story from her in The White Guy Dies First, and her name is Adiba Jagardar. I believe is how you say that. And I'm so sorry, and please correct me if I said that wrong. I picked up this book and I was so excited because it was like a romance, enemies to lovers, and I was like, okay. And also, I got with it a pre-order gift, and it was this cute little movie poster. I mean, obviously it's not a movie poster, but for me, it's giving like 27 Dresses, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, like that kind of like style of movie poster.
Hello. It has occurred to me that the reason this poster looks so familiar is because it's actually a copy of the poster for 10 Things I Hate About You, a movie that I know exists. I know what it's about. I've just actually never watched it. So yes, I'm uncultured. I'm stupid. I'm sorry. Yeah, either way, very humbling this experience was. Anyway, back to the video.
I was gagging. I love this so much. So I get into this book and I'm so excited. And just as a spoiler, if the title and the thumbnail was not spoiler enough, I didn't like it. I don't have a lot of experience reading romance. Like I read YA and they usually have like a romance subplot, but it's not always the main focus. But some of the things that I read in this book, I was like, no, I'm sorry. Truly, I feel like it was just a miss for me. I don't think it was like objectively bad. I just think like it's obviously different from the stuff that I've read from this author. So I was excited for the pivot, but I don't think I was really ready to receive it. Anyway, hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. I know I was supposed to be doing like Halloween books. I do have one planned. I'm reading 2 more for this month, but you see the problem is that I'm trying to get through this one, and I guess minor spoiler for my review of that book, I just cannot get into it. It's not even that long. It's taken me 2 weeks to get through it. I can't. I don't know what's wrong with me. Part of it is also I'm just like kind of busy. So I'm like, I haven't been able to really sit down and read. And then I had another book that I was going to read and review on the channel. And I found out that it was under St. Martin's Press. It was actually devastating because I started it and I was like, this is actually going to be a banger. And then I can't review it. Oh my God, punch me in the face. It would hurt less, truly. Anyway, so since I didn't have that prepared for today, I thought I would revisit Four Eids and a Funeral. I debated on whether or not I wanted to make this review, but I was like, you know what? I want to hear what everyone else has to say about it, because I feel like the reviews on Goodreads were very divided and it was almost controversial what people had to say about it. So I'm like, I need the input. I need us as a community to get in the comments and talk about this, because otherwise I'm shouting into a void. Goodreads is a good resource for looking at reviews and trying to gauge whether or not you will like a book. I take the reviews with a grain of salt whenever I use Goodreads, just because I will never let Goodreads reviews dissuade me from reading a book that I already want to, because I'm like, hey, maybe I will just have a different opinion. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I'm talking about Four Eids and a Funeral. Anyway, so if you didn't know, Four Eids and a Funeral is obviously written by 2 authors. It is a romance. It's enemies to lovers, childhood friends to lovers. So Tiwa and Saeed grew up as childhood friends when she moved into his neighborhood, and they have been very close throughout most of their childhood. But one day, Saeed decides that he's going to go to a boarding school away from Tiwa, and she is upset at first, but they promise to maintain contact with each other. And then for some reason, they just stop all contact altogether and become enemies. Tiwa hates Saeed for leaving her and for not staying in touch, and Saeed hates her for also not staying in touch. So they have not talked to each other in quite some time at the start of the book, but what inevitably reunites them is the death of their childhood friend and librarian, Miss Barnes. So Saeed comes back to their hometown and they come back for the funeral. Some helpful context is that both of these characters are Muslim. So the day of Mrs. Barnes' funeral, while they're back in their hometown, they find out that their Islamic center burned up. So they no longer have a place to host Eid for this year. But the Islamic Center is very important to Tiwa, so she does everything in her power to kind of rally the community to help them rebuild the Islamic Center. Eventually, Saeed gets wrapped up in this plan as well, and they spend the next few weeks trying to find a way to save their Islamic Center from demolition. They get closer, they rekindle their childhood feelings, and things happen. That is essentially the setup for this story, and honestly, I was kind of into it. I was very into it, actually. And now comes the part where I have to acknowledge that because I'm so used to reading YA and just like fantasy fiction, I'm used to kind of recognizing world building, and more specifically just trying to get an idea of the background. And it's really important for me to understand everything that is essentially the foundation of the story before I can really get into it. So that means if I read a story and I realize that there's something that is inconsistent or like a plot hole, I just focus, I hone in on that. Some say it's a good trait, some say it's not, but it's something that I as a reader have like conditioned myself to do. The problem is that my brain doesn't shut off when I read romance. And what people will tell you with romance is that the world building is not that important. People tend to focus on the actual romance part of these books, and they don't actually focus on the background. But unfortunately, I have a curse, and I have to tell you that when I read this book, there was such a glaring plot hole that it took me out of the story, like so bad. So that was the spoiler-free section of this book. If you don't want spoilers, I would suggest clicking off the video now. So now I'm gonna go into all of my critiques of this book, what I liked about it, and my specific criticisms on the people that were on Goodreads shitting on this book because of its Muslim characters. It is messy, so let's get into it. So the main reason that I was so like not vibing with the story, especially at the end, because at the end we find out like a big reveal. Again, spoiler, if you didn't click off already, spoiler. So Saeed went to this boarding school, right? And he was like, I'm gonna still stay in contact with Tiwa. She is my best friend. I cannot forget all the friends I have back at home. So Saeed has a sister. Her name is Safiya. And she was worried that Saeed was going to have a hard time making friends at his boarding school. So her solution was to cut him off from his friends at home to force him to make friends at this boarding school. So Saeed and Tiwa didn't actually just break contact for no reason, because Saeed thought Tiwa was the one that wasn't responding to his letters. Tiwa thought he wasn't responding to her letters, but actually it was because Safiya was intercepting all of these letters, hiding them away, and making them each respectively think that the other was not responding. So she played a crucial role in breaking up their friendship. Fun. Interesting, I guess. Now this reveal absolutely ruined the book for me. I was okay with it leading up to this point. Once they said this about his sister, I was like, no, you actually lost me. The context of this is that the only way that Saeed and Tiwa were communicating with each other was over letter, which already I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, fine. Maybe they're actually 70-year-olds at heart. But this story does take place post-pandemic, and we can put that marker on the story because they mention at one point that someone is wearing a COVID mask, which I also, side note, pet peeve, I hate when people call it a COVID mask. I'm like, no, that thing had a name before. It's a surgical mask. Thank you. They put a timestamp on this book by making it take place post-2020, okay? First. So already I'm like, why are they communicating over letter? But they explain it in the book that Tiwa does not have a cell phone. Why? I don't know. That premise is supposed to be like, okay, yeah, so that's why they had no other way of communicating with each other when the letters didn't come in. Already, the part of my brain that is like logical was like, why didn't they just like keep writing letters? Or like, why was the immediate idea that, oh, this person decided that they're not going to write letters to me anymore? I'm very aware of our United States Postal Service, and I know that sometimes letters get lost in the mail. So I would imagine that any logical person would just be like, oh, maybe my letter got lost. Let me just write another one. But no. But I was like, you know what? This being really nitpicky. This is a romance. I can't be that nitpicky. However, they confirm in the story that Tiwa has a landline in her home. So if at any point Saeed realized, hey, I haven't got a letter from Tiwa in a while, why did he never try to call her? Like that was a very viable line of communication. Why did he just assume that she stopped writing letters. That bothers me. They should have never mentioned that she has a landline. I'm already like, okay, we're really on thin ice with this whole plot being dependent on these teenagers writing letters to each other. Postage stamps are very expensive. So I'm like, why are they It's too much frustration. I'm drinking this coffee that's supposed to taste like toasted marshmallow and it just tastes like the burnt edges of the marshmallow. This whole thing just confused me to no end. Like, they could have made this a period piece and, I don't know, put it in like Bridgerton era. That would make so much more sense. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, letters, they don't got phones. But again, maybe that is nitpicky. Maybe I am not focusing on the romance and I'm too focused on quote unquote world building that actually doesn't exist in romance books. Another problem I had, however, is that the title of this book is Four Eids and a Funeral. The Four Eids is in reference to 4 different Eid parties that happened after Saeed went to boarding school. Well, it was like one right before he went and then the rest were afterwards, and just the conflicts that they had with each other and how they were downright avoiding each other. And the funeral is in reference to Mrs. Barnes, her funeral. So you would think that this event, her funeral, would be really important to the story. It is not. This event is what brings them together in the first place, but the whole story revolves on the burning of the Islamic Center. Someone didn't burn it down. There was a fire. It was not intentional. But so after this woman's funeral, she is never mentioned again. She just like kind of fades into the background, which is a little sad. I mean, like, they really hype her up as someone that was like crucial to their relationship because they each loved spending time at the library. She brought them together, and her cat that I forgot what they named the cat. But yeah, they really never mention her again. And it just focuses on the Islamic Center, which again, like, I don't have a problem that is the focus. I just I hate that plot line doesn't go anywhere. And there was a few instances throughout the story where there was like a character that we met or something that happened that we thought was going to be more important than it actually was. There was one character that I was like, oh, she's about to be like a really core mentor person. Like, she's going to be more influential to the story. No. So a little background about our character, Saeed, our love interest. He is feeling a lot of pressure from his family to pursue a career in medicine, even though he secretly wants to be an artist. So he meets this woman that is painting a mural that is dedicated to South Asian culture. And they set it up as if like she's gonna be his mentor. She's gonna be the person that tells him like, hey, you don't have to be a doctor. You can be an artist. Look how great I'm doing, and I'm an artist. They make it a big deal that Saeed is gonna go meet her, and he's like having this internal conflict about whether or not he's gonna tell his parents that he doesn't want to be a doctor. And then he goes to meet this woman, and then she never comes back into the story. And then also simultaneously, there's a buildup with Tiwa where she's like, oh, I'm trying to get like a law internship. And she's like, oh my God, I got it. And then nothing happens. They never mentioned her internship. I thought it was going to be like a bigger thing of like, okay, they're growing up, they're moving on to like college and stuff, like another big transition. Will their friendship / relationship last through this big transition? And then they never bring up her internship again, which I'm like, why include it? Why include it as a plot thing that she was applying for an internship if it was just never going to come back? These 2 instances, I was like, okay, it's going to be like a Chekhov's gun or something. Like, this is going to be something I have to remember. And then it never comes back into the story. That is a very big pet peeve of mine. I'm like, if you're going to mention something and like set it up to be this really important thing and then have it die, just take it out. And this is a time where I'm like, we could have taken out that like weird plot that didn't actually go anywhere and put in some extra cute like romance scenes. But the biggest pet peeve I had, and what again really turned me off from the book the minute I got to this point, was Safiya and her reasoning for cutting off Saeed from Tiwa's letters. First of all, it's obviously really selfish of her. Like, really, really selfish of her to do that. And her reasoning is just such bullshit. It's so like not based on any kind of reality. I was like laughing. I was in my Joker era when I was thinking about this because Safiya was worried that Saeed was not going to make friends. So she was like, I have to intercept these letters from Tiwa so that he is forced to make friends at this boarding school. And yet she had to enlist Julian, which is Saeed's friend at the boarding school. She had to enlist him to steal the letters from Tiwa. And it even bothers me because why would he go through with it? Why would he be okay with like essentially cutting off his friend from his like main support system? Because Julian was like, oh, Tiwa is like such a meanie, like you complain about her all the time. But he didn't start complaining about Tiwa until he stopped getting letters from her. So if he thought that Tiwa was not a good person, he could only make that assumption afterwards when he was already mad at her for supposedly not responding to the letters. He had no basis for thinking that Tiwa was a bad person before that happened. Like, this whole reasoning to me is just so flawed. And I think part of the reason is because the book didn't want to have like an antagonist. They didn't want to have like a bad guy, because Saeed forgives Sophia and Julian for doing this. And I don't know, me, I hold a grudge. I'm kind of bitter. If that would happen to me, oh my God, we would never talk again for the rest of my life. Because at any point, at any step in that plan, you had every opportunity to like turn back, I don't know, feel some cognitive dissonance about what you're doing, and she didn't. And then it's also weird because whenever he would come back, she would try to force them together. So I'm like, you are not sold on your own plan, girl. Because how are you gonna be like, oh no, make friends, get rid of Tiwa, like don't worry about her, and then the minute he comes back home, he's like, oh my God, you guys should like hang out, like you guys are friends. Girl, I know that I'm not supposed to care this much, that it doesn't make sense, but for the life of me, I cannot turn off that part of my brain. It matters to me so much that this makes sense. It has to make sense. I was okay with these children having such direct access to all their local government officials. I was okay with them finding all these like weird penal codes about their town. I was okay with this town literally being a mural town. Like they just have murals everywhere. Like that's their shtick. I was okay with that. It sounded really ridiculous, but I was okay with that. I was willing to go with that because I'm like, it's a romance. It's not supposed to be that serious. But this, I couldn't ignore it. If Sophia wasn't this weird like psychopath, I would be okay with it. Now I remember why it took me so long to make the review. It's because it actually makes me go crazy to think about this. Which goes into my next criticism of the book, which is that it just lacked a general conflict. Because they even build up to this moment, and a lot of romance stories have this, where there's some kind of conflict or fight between the love interests that cause them to like separate and not talk to each other, and then they have to reconcile and get back on their original journey. So the build up to this is that Saeed was planning on painting a mural for the Islamic Center to kind of get it designated as like a mural site so that they wouldn't demolish the building, because they were trying to turn it into apartments. He was going to use the mural for his application to art school. He wrote a letter talking about it. He eventually scrapped the idea because he was like, hey, maybe I shouldn't take advantage of the burning down of my cultural center to get into art school. So he gets rid of the letter, but Tiwa finds it. So they get into a big fight and they stop talking to each other for a little bit. Now this scene is supposed to be like the main conflict, this like big separation for them, but it just like doesn't have that good build up, so it doesn't feel as impactful as it should be. This is supposed to be like their big fight, someone runs off in the rain, like sad music plays in the background, and it just doesn't feel that way because it doesn't feel like that big of a betrayal. He got rid of it. Like he decided not to go through with it really early on. If he had led her to that point, like much further into the story, it would have been so much more like, oh man, that really hurts. It just lacks the buildup of like Tiwa regaining trust in Saeed only to have it be completely shattered again. Part of it, it's because they really fall back into being friends very quickly, despite her internal monologue being like, ew, Saeed, I don't like you, but I love you. Because yeah, they just immediately get back into it. So it doesn't even really feel like enemies to lovers, if I'm being honest. Immortal Dark, I did shit on that book, but that isn't enemies to lovers. They genuinely hate each other. There was even supposed to be a conflict with the mayor of the town where they put him as like a really shady character to the point where you almost think that he set the Islamic Center on fire on purpose so that he could demolish it and make it into apartment buildings, to the point where he's even like breaking the law and preventing them from bringing this up at their whatever town hall meetings. So they're like really building him up to be this villain, and then he just like gives up. So they can't even stick to him being the villain. And I'm like, that would have been so easy. That was the plot I thought we were going for. But again, we were too cowardly to pull the trigger. And then at the very end of the story, the whole like, gotcha, haha, you have to keep the Islamic Center alive, is that they roll up with their wrecking balls or whatever. They're ready to demolish the Islamic Center. Saeed saves the day by citing a penal code, essentially saying like, oh, there's a mural here, you can't demolish it, which bothers me because Saeed painted this mural without any kind of permits. He just took it upon himself to do this. Everyone in town saw it. They were gonna demolish the building, and he was like, well, there's already a mural here, so according to the laws of this fake town, you can't demolish this building. And the mayor is like, you rotten children, you got me once again, which bothers me because he could have been arrested for vandalism. Is that being too nitpicky and applying more real world laws into this fake world? Kind of. But if your whole plot is based on citing these penal codes and going to like the handbook of this town, I feel like bringing up the fact that this is actually vandalism is not that big of a stretch. Like they are the ones that are bringing laws and shit like that into this story. So I'm like, I feel like that's not a really big jump for me to say, how was he not arrested for vandalism? And I'm sorry, but to have like the whole like, yay, we saved the town moment hinge on him reading from the, oh my God. It's so dorky. I hated it. I hated every minute of it. I'm so sorry. And of course, on to the characters. I hated Sophia's character. First of all, she destroyed her younger brother's friendship. Why? Because she had a bad experience when she transferred schools and assumed that her brother would have the same problems, and then felt bad about what she did and decided that the best way to fix it was to throw these two people in a room together and have them fix it themselves. Way to shift the blame off of yourself and force these two people to make up so that you can feel better about yourself. She's just a bad person, objectively. And I feel bad because I was ready to like shit on her on Goodreads, but then I found out everyone was shitting on her because she's a lesbian. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't have to go there, guys. But I'll go into that in a little bit. I'm gonna quickly say that I also didn't like Tiwa's character just because she didn't really have a character arc. Saeed did. Saeed had a very good character arc throughout the story where he starts off like trying to please his parents, trying to, fit into this mold, but then he eventually comes to terms with who he wants to be, what he wants to do with his future, and he's able to like talk to his parents and get that validation from them and know that he's supported and loved. It's a good arc of him like learning to speak up for himself and becoming more independent and taking control of his future. For Tiwa, her whole thing is that she's like depressed about her family situation because her parents are divorced, and they got divorced because her younger brother Tommy was killed in a hit and run. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but we don't find out until kind of late in the story. They put it very much in the background to the point where it didn't like register in my mind that he died until much, much later. So I feel like her arc was supposed to be like, oh, well, she's so like type A and very involved in the Islamic Center and involved in her local government because she was trying to make a law, or rather some kind of like regulation on pedestrian crossing and stuff like that because that was how her brother died. But it didn't feel like an arc to me. Nothing about her character really changed from beginning to end. At the beginning, she was just like really type A and insufferable, and at the end, she was just really type A but very successful in achieving all her goals. So kind of an arc. Not really though. That was a lot of cons. What I did like about the book, because I did like some things, it was really just towards the end where I was like, ugh. They do have a really good discussion in this book about racism within marginalized communities, where Tiwa is not really accepted by the rest of the Islamic community in their town because she's Black and her family is Black. I thought that conversation was amazing, especially because like it was something that she was aware of and she had dealt with previously, and he was not there to be like her knight in shining armor, but he really like uplifted her in a lot of ways. So I thought it was very nicely done. A lot of the cultural aspects of the story were very powerful. I really enjoyed a lot of it, especially like with Saeed's character and the expectations he felt that he had to live up to. And of course they did have some cute moments throughout the book. I just think we could have gone a little bit more in depth with those. I normally don't say this, but I think we could have had more romance. Normally I'm like, hey, stay away from the romance, develop the plot. I think we could have had more. We were a little stingy with the cute scenes. That being said, I think the cultural part of this story is what had people so divided, because this is a story that centers on Islam. So some readers were pointing out that Safiya being a lesbian and Saeed and Tiwa kissing at the end of the story both go against Islam. A lot of people were really shitting on them for including these aspects into the story, and even going so far as to say that this author is not a true Muslim, because I believe she also identifies as queer. I am not sure. Don't quote me on that. I will look it up. A Muslim woman wrote this book. For her to include this is still valid and doesn't mean that she is not Muslim. I do not identify as Muslim. However, I think that a lot of that was very uncalled for, especially to go as far as to put in a Goodreads review that lesbians is a con for a book. Like, this is just a prime instance of, if you don't like the book, then don't read it, because this author includes a lot of like queer identities into her work normally. So if you simply do not like that, if you don't agree with that, don't read the book. My perspective is just that like people have so many different interpretations when it comes to religion. So if this is her interpretation, like, don't dog on her for that. I don't like this book because of a lot of the plot. And obviously this book might not be for me because I'm not a romance reader. I don't primarily read that. But I would never go as far to say as like, oh, nobody should read this book, or that it's a bad book, or that it doesn't have good representation, because that would just be, quite frankly, stupid of me to say on the internet. I just could not believe when I opened up Goodreads to see that conversation happening under a book like this that has such amazing cultural representation and was written by a Muslim woman, potentially women, plural. I am unsure. Anyway, I think that's the end of my review. I was really mad about the book having this ending, but I was even more mad when I looked at Goodreads and saw people saying this kind of stuff. And I don't want to say too much, again, because I do not identify as Muslim. I'm not 100% aware of the cultural differences, the religious aspects, so I don't want to say too much. But of course, I don't support anyone dogging on an author personally for how they identify religiously, sexually, whatever. You can criticize a book the way it was written, its content, without directly criticizing the author. That's just not something for you to comment on. That's not what a review is for. That's not what Goodreads is for. Overall, I think I would give the book a 2 out of 5. Unfortunately, I'm very sad to say that. I think this was just like the first miss I've had from these authors. I've read some of their other stuff and I've never had this issue. Truly is, I think, just because it's the romance. And I think also it might have been a little bit harder because it is 2 authors writing the same story. I don't really know how that works in a publishing sense, in an editing sense. And who knows, that might have impacted the way that the story flowed and the general plot. I didn't not like the book, but I just didn't like the ending, which is usually my critique for a lot of books. It's either like the ending sells it for me or the ending ruins it for me. But anyway, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think, because quite frankly, I am still not sold on my own opinions. I'm open to greater conversation about this book so that I can get a more holistic viewpoint. I'm still hanging this up because it looks so good. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to check out Four Eids and a Funeral. Check out the authors on their social media. Send them some love because obviously they were not getting it on Goodreads. Be sure to follow me on all my social media at Listen to Kristen on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And with that being said, that's the end of the video. I will be coming back to spooky October vibes in the next video, hopefully. We'll see. Thank you. That is the end of the video. I am going to go do my errands for the rest of the day. Be productive. That is my advice to you today. Be productive and don't shit on people for how they write books and who they are personally. That is not good. I don't advocate for that. Don't do that. If you're going to review a book, review the book itself, not the person. Thank you. Yes? That was actually really good timing. Actually, yeah.
I wonder if you got that, like, the knock knock.